Hello there, everyone, and welcome to the Metagame, the show where we not only talk about board games, but we talk about talking about board games. I'm your host, Chaz Marler, and in a previous episode of the Metagame, some participants in the YouTube chat area mentioned that it would be interesting to them to hear how I got started making board game media. So, never one to turn down an opportunity to talk about myself. That's what we'll be talking about this episode. Now, along the way, I'm going to do something a little bit differently. I think I'm going to turn over to the chat area more often and sooner than I usually do. So I'll periodically be referring to the YouTube chat for questions. So this episode may be more of a segmented presentation and extended Q&A session. And as always, to have one of your posts in the YouTube chat considered for the Q&A portion of our show, make sure to post it in the YouTube chat area, being sure to include our hashtag TMG, because I'll be using a web browser's search tool to highlight the YouTube chat posts that include that hashtag to kind of bring anyone who wants their comments mentioned on the show, bring those up to focus, and we'll go over those first. Now, of course, as always, not all submitted comments will be featured on the show, but I do try to go back and reread the ones that I missed afterwards. So if not now, maybe they could be addressed later. But for now, let me inspire you with my tale of marginal success in a sliver of niche internet media. Now, usually what I do with these episodes is I actually type out a script or at least a rough outline of kind of a monologue to go over. And this time I actually thought maybe having a monologue like that isn't really the way to go. So I have kind of some smaller talking points that I'm going to turn over to the chat window to kind of see where those lead and kind of go back and forth. Maybe. I'm pulling this out of the air as I go. So we'll see what happens in terms of bouncing back and forth. But let me get started. For those of you who don't know, I'm Chaz Marler. I work with the Dice Tower, and I also have my own YouTube channel called Pair of Dice Paradise. And I believe we have, ding, here we go. There's the Dice Tower that we all know and love, and there's my channel, Pair of Dice Paradise, with some sort of subtle subliminal hint there to subscribe, just in case that had crossed your mind. But we'll come back to that a little bit later on in the show. So, Pair of Dice Paradise, my first video posted on the Pair of Dice Paradise YouTube channel was posted on September 3rd, 2013. So it's been about 2.5 years since that channel launched. And in that time, I went through my records today and looked it up, did some math, and I've produced about 230 videos in that time. Not only for Pair of Dice Paradise, but also for the Dice Tower and several other projects in conjunction with other board game media makers that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years. So, okay, before we get in, but let's go back even farther. Let me give you a little more background. Before we get into creating specifically board game content, one of the first things to establish is why. Why are you creating this board game content? And I think being able to answer that question of why any podcaster or YouTube media maker is making their content, being able to answer why is a fundamental question. Of course, I can't speak for others, but of course I got into creating YouTube videos so I could get as many free board games as possible. No, that's a lie. That's actually, anyone who gets into it for that is fooling themselves, because it's honestly, if that's your motivation, it's not worth it. My motivation for making the videos is really to have a creative outlet. I've always in my life needed a creative outlet, whether it's illustrations, drawing comics. I acted in all the school plays in middle school and high school. I've drawn forever, and in high school, I had one of those. I saved up. I worked all summer, and I saved up and got one of those big, over-the-shoulder 1980s era camcorders that took the VHS tapes. And it was about 30 pounds and creaked when you carried it around. But In high school, I would make videos with my friends with this old creaky camcorder. And, I would always direct my friends around. I'd make these silly videos directing my friends until inevitably they weren't my friends anymore. In fact, my friends' experience with my directorial techniques in high school earned me the nickname of overbearing wannabe tyrant. And that is not a lie. That is the absolute truth. That was that was the nickname that I earned from their experience making those videos under my thumb. But I discovered, kind of this passion, and back then, I'd have like two VCRs set up, hooked up to my big camcorder, and I would have, there was no editing software. There was no Adobe Premiere. There was no Final Cut Pro. So I would have two VCRs and my camcorder hooked up to the TV in our living room, and I would be strategically playing and hitting pause to do the editing and the cuts for the different scenes that we would record to get the final footage on a VHS tape. And it was a lot of work. Probably even more work than doing editing in Premiere and stuff. But I didn't realize it really at the time, but I loved it. I loved doing it. And in college, that was high school. Then in college, I took one kind of course in college about television production, kind of learning how life works on a live television news studio, working the cameras and the teleprompters and the control room and being on set and doing the lighting and stuff. I took one course in college, and that was actually something I just took for fun as one of my extracurriculars, and that was really a neat experience. And then I didn't really think about it for a long, long time, and actually until about probably 2012, 2013, after I discovered the Dice Tower. And at that point in my life, I was running my own business, and I was responsible for making sure everything continues running. So I got to a point in my life where I would basically was working all day, every day, and felt like I had forgotten who I was. So my wife encouraged me to rediscover a hobby, either artwork or something else. And I'd drawn and done illustrations and actually self-published some comic books in the early 90s, kind of in the local regional area. And I guess I'd grown more impatient as life had gone on. And so I wasn't patient enough to sit down and draw a comic book anymore. And with video production, I'd been watching a lot of Dice Tower and Crits Happen and Watch It Played and other people at that time. I've been watching a lot of, getting back into board games and watching a lot of videos. I thought, why don't I make some videos? It's also something I can share with my daughter and do with her and have some memories to make. So I needed this creative outlet. It seemed like a good fit. It was a faster turnaround time than trying to produce a comic book. So I started doing that's when I launched the Pair of Dice Paradise channel and started doing some videos. So that's kind of the issue 0, episode 0 kind of origin story. So the next big step is what happened when you started with the channel and how did I get more involved with the Dice Tower itself. But before we get to chapter 2 of our story, let's pop over to the comments, the chat area, and see if anyone has anything about chapter 0 that they have any questions about. So I'm going to search for my hashtag. Hashtag iSearch. Here we go. Oh, there's 3 of things so far. Christopher asks, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Thanks for your contribution, Christopher. It's always appreciated and on point. Let's move past the Monty Python references. The next TMG hashtag response is an African swallow answering Christopher. So thank you. It makes my job a lot easier when the chat answers their own questions. So, I could just sit here with 20 minutes of dead air and let you guys handle it yourself. So thank you for that very much. I always appreciate it. Someone's asking about Star Wars Rebellion. I have I have it on good authority that my copy that I pre-ordered back in January is going to show up any day. And I'm looking forward to that one. All right. A couple more. So someone asked, Joshua asks, so can you guys call me OWT, Overbearing Wannabe Tyrant? You know what? If you watch enough videos and hang out with me in the chat and at conventions long enough, you'll probably start calling me that whether you want to or not. So feel free. Feel free to call me that. I could be like LL Cool J and have like 97 different nicknames, and that's definitely one of them. Okay. Draft Mechanic asks, Chaz, do you remember what the first videos that drew you into watching the Dice Tower stuff was? Do I? I do. I actually have, don't tell Tom, but I actually have bookmarked in my web browser the very first Dice Tower video that I stumbled onto, because it kind of has sentimental value to me at this point. And I knew nothing of the Dice Tower or anything like that. And I discovered the Dice Tower actually by a video that Tom produced that had nothing to do with board games. As you know, I'm a bit of a fan of board game components. I love a good component. And there's a website called litco.net, litko.net. Litco makes these really neat plastic and wooden components, little explosions and markers and counters and doors, and great things for Arkham horror, Eldritch horror, role-playing, all sorts of things. And so, and at the time, in early 2012, I had just got my copy of Twilight Imperium 3rd edition. And I was already familiar with the Litco website, and I knew that they had these plastic stands, these little risers, so you can have all your spaceships on these risers kind of floating above all the ground units and planets when you're playing Twilight Imperium. So it's like, oh, I want to go get these little stands for Twilight Imperium. And so I went and I found them, and there was on the Litco webpage, there was a video review of these little stands. It's like, oh, cool, I'll watch a video review. This Tom Vassell guy from the Dice Tower. So I watched Tom's review of these little Litco stands, and I ordered them, of course. But after placing my order and sitting around like, well, what do I do next? I was like, well, that was kind of that guy was energetic and engaging. I wonder if the Dice Tower has produced any other videos. And that was my introduction to the Dice Tower. And soon after that, within the next 6 to 8 months, my own personal board game collection went from about 5 games to about 40. And it's just continued on from there. But yeah, that was my introduction to the Dice Tower. I remember exactly which video and day that it was. So there you go. Let's see, here's another question with the hashtag TMG. Don't forget to put the hashtag, everything's backwards when you look at your monitor. Don't forget to put the hashtag TMG in your question to make it highlight so I can see it if you're asking a question directly from me. Joshua asks, when editing, do you do that with your daughter or do you edit yourself? The actual, if you mean the editing, the post-production that's done in Premiere on the computer, that I do myself. I'll do that in the evenings. Usually I do my editing in the evenings after my daughter goes to bed. Kind of have some quiet time before kind of winding down. That's when I'll usually do most of my editing. And here's a little secret Easter egg for you guys that are bothering to watch today. Since I do my editing late at night, you can usually tell when I'm starting to get a little bit tired and a little bit loopy. Sometimes the crazier the things that I sneak in post-production in a video, usually the later at night it is that I'm editing. There was one, I can't remember, there was a Board Game Breakfast episode where I had kept having a burrito fade in to the scene, covering up certain things, like stuff would turn into a burrito. That was a late night thing. So, then now you know. Okay, and again, I apologize for two things. I have a hair in my mouth. And also, I'm probably going to butcher a lot of names here, but Radek Z asks, Chaz, did you face any problems after the Asmoday series, like from Dice Tower or the publishers? No, not really. I haven't heard word one from any publishers. So, I mean, it's not like they complained or I heard anything. You know, it's probably, if nothing, I'm probably just being shunned and blacklisted, which, you know, c'est la vie. But no, the only conversation that I had with the Dice Tower that was even closely related to not even friction about it was when I did my final episode of the series, right before the final segment about Asmoday aired. Tom contacted me beforehand saying, you know, how many more segments are you doing on this? I was like, oh, this is the last one. I was like, okay, because it seemed like you were wrapping up, and it seemed like a good time to wrap it up. It's like, yeah. So that was pretty much the entirety of the discussion regarding those segments. I've been really fortunate in that my experience with the Dice Tower and publishers and other media makers in the board game world has been very mutually respectful. And I appreciate that. So I don't know if that's been everyone's experience, but that has definitely been my experience so far. So so that's it. Okay, let's continue on. I'm going to highlight some more chats here. A lot more people have been mentioning how when they first discovered the Dice Tower, they also had a little bit of an explosion in the size of their board game collection. So, yep, I can understand that. Kabuki Kid, hello again. Always a pleasure to see you. Mentioned that Kabuki Kid thinks that I would make a terrible weatherman. Is that because everything is always partly cloudy whenever I give a forecast? If you want, I will go outside and I will try to shoot lightning bolts up into the sky to make it sunny or rainy or rainbow wherever you're at. But my own experience with it has been that it hasn't worked very well. So if it's perfect weather for you tomorrow, that was me. But if it's horrible weather for you tomorrow, it didn't work. So, okay, let's continue on to the next question here. Chaz, what do you think of the new Rogue Squadron teaser trailer? I'm assuming you saw it by now. Oh, cool, neat, a pop culture question. Cool. Okay. Yes, I did see the Rogue One teaser trailer. I tried to kind of keep away from any spoilers or info about Rogue One, but I thought that Rogue One was good. The story of it, I thought. Oh, and spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't watched the trailer yet. So if you don't want to know anything about Rogue One trailer yet, mute me if you haven't already. But I thought that Rogue One was just going to be about a little squadron of X-Wing pilots that like got stranded somewhere, like on Dagobah or something, or like, you know, a cross between Star Wars and Star Trek Voyager. I thought it was going to be this rogue squadron that got lost somewhere. So when I saw the trailer, I was really glad to find out I was completely wrong about what it's going to be about. And to be honest, if the movie is as not serious, dramatic and substantial as it appears to be from the trailers, trailers can always be wrong, but if the movie is like that, I'm probably in the camp where I'm actually now looking forward to Rogue Squadron more than actually episode The Force Awakens, whatever number that is, 14, 27, 8. Anyway, I'm probably looking forward to Rogue Squadron more than The Force Awakens now. And I'm one of the people, I did enjoy Force Awakens, but Rogue Squadron, maybe it's just because it completely flipped my expectations for what I thought it was going to be about. But yay. All right. No, Christopher, you may not have a burrito. That was one of the comments, by the way, one of the chats he asked. That's why I blurted that out. Cleese asks, do you and Sam agree on the Asmoday topic? I don't know. To be honest, I actually haven't. I'm assuming you're referring to Sam Healy from the Dice Tower. I actually haven't heard a lot of Sam Healy's opinion on the matter. So I don't know. Hopefully this summer I'll get a chance to bump into Sam at a convention or two, and hopefully I'll be able to find out. At the Gamma Trade Show, we were also busy. Yeah, Sam, Z, Suzanne, Eric, and we didn't really discuss it very much. Tom, we were walking down the sidewalk once, and Tom and I were talking about it a little bit, but it was more just like, well, what if the industry did this? And what if the industry did that? It was more just general stuff. But everyone else, haven't really had any conversations with them about it. But I would be interested to find out what all of those people think, because they have far more experience in the board game industry than I do. So it'd be neat to see what their perspective is. Okay. Yes, and Kabuki, thank you for clarifying that the Weatherman thing was because of trying to point to the right spot on the screen, but being backwards. Yeah, I'll just add that to my list of reasons why I'm glad I dropped out of meteorology school. Okay. All right, I'm going to look for a couple more. Okay. Okay, no more TMG tags. So let's go back to the topic, as long as I didn't close the window. There we go. All right, so let's go back to where I was starting off Pair of Dice Paradise in late 2013. So there I was, producing a few videos, and I tried to make at least one a week, sometimes two a week, but that was kind of the schedule I was on. And so after about 6 months, I probably had a couple dozen videos posted on the Pair of Dice Paradise channel. And by that time, I kind of discovered my voice and how I wanted to play certain things up, and basically who the character, the personality that I was trying to find again. I finally rediscovered who I am and who I wanted to be. So by that time, I was feeling recharged and myself again on video. Then in early 2014, Tom Fassel from the Dice Tower, he put out an invitation for contributors on one of his episodes of Board Game Breakfast, which at that time was only a couple of months old. So I was thinking about it, and I thought it was a neat opportunity. So I contacted Tom because of that. And then in Board Game Breakfast episode number 17, my very first Head in the Clouds segment ran. And at that time, it wasn't even called Head in the Clouds. It wasn't Head in the Clouds for at least 6 months or so. It didn't even have a name. But I wanted to mention, though, as a content creator of not just board games and YouTube channels, but as just a content creator in general, the Board Game Breakfast segments have been one of the best things that could have possibly happened to me as a content creator. And I'll tell you why. It's not just because of the exposure that the Board Game Breakfast series has provided, but it's excellent exposure. That's great. But it's because it's not only provided me with a content creation schedule, a consistent schedule each week for having to produce something for an audience and find out, do I have something to say, and say it. But it's also because it's taught me how to edit my content. And I think that is a critically important thing to learn. I'll give you an example in a second. But for the first year of the Board Game Breakfast segments that I did were limited to 2 minutes in length. So condensing and streamlining a message to fit it coherently into that little tiny time period has been an excellent exercise in learning how to edit yourself and edit your own content. Learning what's important in what I just said and recorded. Why do I think that this is part of the script is important, but this other part is expendable because I'm 30 seconds over and I got to cut it down. Learning what can be cut and why. What doesn't further your message. What's unimportant, but you don't want to cut it because you like it or it was a lot of work to make, but it's frivolous and you don't need it. There's lots of times where I'll spend over an hour on one little bit or special effect, and then afterwards realize that I'm 5 seconds over, I got to cut it. That's what's got to be cut because it doesn't further the story, and you got to be able to cut those things. It's like there's a horrible term in the industry that it's like, you know, cutting off your hand or you know, throwing out the baby with the bathwater or that. Anyway, being able to take the thing that you really love, that you put together, that you're really proud of, realizing that it doesn't further the story, and cut it to stay on point. So the 2 minutes, having to do that on a consistent schedule and edit down to 2 minutes has been, I think, a critically important exercise that has vastly improved my own content creation. And an example, I think, of a place where you can see a difference, where a really good practical example that anyone can see is take the amazingly awesome television show Arrested Development. As you know, that was on Fox. And any network television show is, limited to like 21 minutes, something like that. It gets shorter every year. But you have 21 minutes because you got to fit in the time slot and you got to fit the commercial breaks. So you have to learn. You have all of these cross-references, jokes, and story to tell, and all these things you're weaving together, but you have to edit it down to keep it paced and moving and at 21 minutes. When Arrested Development had its season on Netflix, one of the really neat things about Netflix is that you no longer are restricted to that 21 minutes per episode. And a lot of the Arrested Development episodes are much longer in length. But I think it is to their detriment. I was watching a lot of I watched the season that's on Netflix, and I was watching them with kind of that critical content creator, editor mindset. And there was a lot of scenes that really could have, and perhaps should have, been edited, trimmed, and tightened up. And I think, I'm under the impression that the Arrested Development season that was on Netflix didn't really get the best reviews in the world. And I think that part of that is due to the editing. I think if those episodes had been trimmed down, not necessarily to 21 minutes, but had been trimmed even further, I think the stories would have had more punch, and I think it would have been better reviewed. So, okay. So that brings me to getting started with the Dice Tower. And that prior to doing the Board Game Breakfast segments starting in 2014, March of 2014, I had maybe one or two interactions communicating with Tom. I had actually developed some sort of little tool that he might have been able to use on the website for tracking like his top 100s over time and charting them out or something. That's what I did. That's what I do for a living, is web programming, stuff like that. So I thought, hey, I'll make this for the Dice Tower because I like the Dice Tower. This is a way I can contribute. So about a year before the Board Game Breakfast segments start, I actually emailed Tom just out of the blue. Hi, I want to introduce myself. I'm such and such, and I made this neat tool. If you want to use it for your website, you're welcome. And nothing ever came of that. And in hindsight, it's kind of, well, would you put something on your website that some stranger on the internet sent you? But I was naive enough to think, hey, I want to help. I want to be helpful. But so basically, I sent that off, and I got an email response back of, hey, thanks. And prior to the Board Game Breakfast segments, that was pretty much the entirety of my communication with Tom Vassell. And the reason I want to mention that is because a lot of people ask me, and they wonder, well, did you have to have a pre-established relationship with Tom to get on, the Board Game Breakfast or anything? And the answer to that is no. What I have found is the majority of content creators that I've worked with enjoy, even personally speaking, even if it's an envious enjoyment, because I can't believe how good he is at that. Look how good he did that. That's amazing. But it's been my experience that there's a mutual appreciation and respect among the majority of content creators. And so if you're producing something, and the key is to be producing content, and if you have established that you can do stuff on a regular schedule, which is one other reason why I think the Board Game Breakfast thing was so important. But even before starting Board Game Breakfast, I had established a schedule trying to do at least one video, sometimes 2 videos a week on my own channel for like 6 months. Creating a small body of consistent content prior to taking yourself to the next level is very important. But you don't have but many times that's all it takes. That's your resume. That's showing who you are and creating that relationship that way. You don't have to find someone, track them down at a convention, and give them a demo tape or take them out to dinner or anything like that. No, the work will speak for itself, in my experience. So, speaking of speaking for myself, let me stop speaking for myself and go back over to the chat area and see what other people are speaking about. I practiced that for an hour and a half, and that came out pretty good. Okay, more burrito questions. No burrito for you. Okay, here we go. Draft Mechanic asks again, Chaz, what was your route like from solo video guy to joining the Dice Tower? How did you grow and get there? Okay, well, I think I just covered that a little bit. Like I said, I was doing my own videos for about 6 months. The blanket solicitation came out for contributions to Board Game Breakfast. I contacted Tom again about it and went from there. Okay. I'm looking for some more TMG comments. Joshua asks, do you think limits, even if self-imposed limits, create better content? Whether those be budget restraints like those on Star Wars Episode 4. I think that understanding what your limits are and working around those limits to the best of your ability definitely does create better content. The example is the 2 minutes thing. And I talked about how that taught me how to be a better editor. That is definitely something that improved my content. But as for self-imposed limits, like trivial things, like I'm not going to sorry, I just almost contradicted myself there. Not saying I'm not going to do a certain thing, or I'm not going to say words that start with the letter R, or something stupid like that. That can be a neat gag and a neat exercise, but I don't think that those type of things necessarily improve your content. Things like knowing what hardware you have available, what lights you have available, what audio equipment you have available, and then practicing and practicing and practicing with that equipment to get the most out of it that you possibly can. That's the type of limits that I think will create better content. And can really actually substantially improve your creativity, which I think, going back to the Star Wars Episode 4 comparison, I think that those limitations, really sparked a lot of the creativity with that. And I think it's also the limitations are one of the reasons why George Lucas kept going back and fiddling with them, because he knew that those limitations were there. And he pushed his creativity as far as he could, but he knew he wanted to go farther, so he couldn't leave well enough alone. But I think those things can definitely be a boost to both content quality and creative quality. Yes, and Joshua also mentions that the term in Hollywood is, quote, kill your baby. That's when you have a scene or a shot that you really like, but it doesn't do anything to enhance the story, so you cut it and it ends up on the cutting room floor, even though you really love it. That's the term for it. To be honest, I just didn't want to say that morbid phrase out loud, just in case I was wrong. And now that I have you backing it up, that's what the phrase is. So there we go. Okay. Here's a question. Does the component proponent have a favorite dice company? What are the best dice to buy for D&D and other RPGs? I've always been partial to Chessex dice. They just seem to be the highest. They always just be the ones I kept being drawn to. They have a wide selection. And it seems like good quality dice. But lots of times, especially pre-internet type of stuff, I would always just gather up any dice that I could find. Whatever the game shop had, those were the dice I ended up with. And I've discovered that no matter what dice you get, there's always an equal chance that they will hate you and vex you and roll poorly out of spite. So it's not necessarily the manufacturing of the dice, it's the fact that a lot of them are evil. So watch out for that too. That always kind of difficult to work with. Okay. Jesse mentions, I think this is about the editing, The same can be said about the Hobbit movies and stretching them into 8 hours of content. Yes. I am in the camp that there was no reason at all to make the Hobbit movies a trilogy or whatever. It barely needed to be 2 movies. But that's an excellent example of something where not being edited and not being able to make that tough decision about your baby because you were just more inclined with, we can schedule this for these holiday seasons and make all this money over 3 years. Losing sight of your artistic integrity, for a very high horse way of putting it. But yeah, the Hobbit movie is a very good example of that. Okay. Joshua mentions, please ignore my question. You've totally answered it. Thank you, I will. Which is a great example of the time lag with the chat window, because I think I've already answered redundantly your question that you've now told me to ignore. So now I'll ignore your note to ignore and ignoring it. So I think that makes us good. Okay. Matthias H. asks, your best game is? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't answer this here for risk of spoilers. I'll spoil Star Wars all day long, but I'm working on my top 100 games of all time video series this year, and so I can't let you know until that is done what my best game or my favorite game of all time is. I will tell you this. When you use the method that the Dice Tower folks recommend of making a stack of index cards and writing out all your games and getting them in, painstakingly take several days to get them in order. When you take that stack of index cards and then the next day you spill them all over your floor, it is kind of interesting because you have to start over from scratch because I've discovered that your brain does not remember what order all 100 of those index cards were in. So that's fun. So if you want to waste a weekend with a fun activity, there's a suggestion. In case my weather manipulation doesn't work for you, Kabuki Kid, and it rains and you have to spend the weekend inside, there's an activity you can do. Okay. Speaking of Kabuki Kid, question comes in. Pretend you had to pick a game of the year early. What is currently the best game you have played this year? I don't know what is wrong with me, but every time I think to the games that I saw at Gamma, the only ones I can remember are Star Trek Panic and the 3 Ninja Turtle games. I'm not even a real big fan of the Ninja Turtle games, so the only ones that pop into my head. I believe I don't know about Game of the Year, but one game I am watching that came out of nowhere that I was not planning on looking at, but I'm very interested in, is called Mystic Vale. I believe it's Mystic Vale. And it's one that is a card building game because you start with these plastic things and you actually insert like up to 3 different rules for cards. So you're building the actual cards you're using, and you can either have like 1 slot filled and have a reusable weak action, or fill more slots but be able to use it less often, but it's more powerful. I'm really looking forward to finding out more about Mystic Vale. I don't know if that's Game of the Year material, but it is one of the most innovative games I've seen pop up that was not on my radar at all. So there's one. Wow. Vince says, hi Chaz, a fan checking in from China. Cool. Good morning. Good morning. What are some of your favorite non-board game hobbies? Favorite books, etc.? Ooh, good question. Some of my favorite hobbies, non-board game hobbies, I've always been a fan of art. Especially illustration. I think I've mentioned there was a Board Game Breakfast episode where I talked about my favorite board game illustrators, and I also gave some examples of non-board game illustrators that I enjoy. Quentin Hoover, he's a board game illustrator though. He did a lot of Magic cards, but and also a lot of comic book artists. I've always liked comics, but I've never really been into collecting comics. I always feel like I should be more into it than I am. But I appreciate them, but whenever I have got into like subscribing to a comic book series for a while, it's always except for one exception, it's always been because of the artist. And I've actually, instead of following a comic book run for the stories, I've followed comic book runs for the artists. So art and illustration is a non-board game hobby that I enjoy. When it comes to reading, believe it or not, I actually enjoy nonfiction usually more than fiction. And not necessarily like historical stuff or anything like that, but reading about how stuff works, and learning about how things work and stuff like that. So that always draws my interest and retains my interest more usually than fiction stories. Actually, some of my favorite books that I've written, there's a couple of books by I believe it's the Heath brothers. They made some books called the irony, made to stick. What makes an idea stick in your brain? And how ironic that I couldn't remember the title of the book. Made to stick, how ideas are made sticky and how things stick in your mind. And also how switch, with the subtitle, How to Change Things When Change is Difficult. Both of those books talk about like marketing campaigns and advertising and how people have instituted change in their cities and their countries and stuff, when all they had was themselves. They didn't have a lot of money and stuff to back them up. Those are actually two of my favorite books, Made to Stick and Switch, How to Institute Change When Change is Hard, or something like that. I highly recommend both those books because they are just fascinating reads. There's that. And I don't play as many video games as I used to. And one other pastime. I realized I was an adult homeowner when I found myself about 4 years ago pulling weeds in my yard and doing yard work and really enjoying it. That's when I realized, crap, I'm old. So those are some of the things I find myself doing when I'm not playing board games. Oh, and also web programming. I love building stuff. I love making things that do stuff on the web and things like that. So that, of course, another huge one. That's what I do lots of times. But I've tried to actually pace myself with that because I did it so much. Like I said at the beginning, it felt like it killed my personality after a while. Okay. Ooh, Matches asks another question here, which is excellent. How to get more girls/women into the hobby? Ooh. Well, here is a very interesting subject. And first of all, I don't think I can really speak intelligently on this subject for two reasons. One, I don't have all this research and stuff, and I'm a guy. And it's really unfair for someone to say, oh, well, the solution is blah, blah, blah. No, why don't you ask the people that are involved? Of course, it's a two-way street. There was a very popular Twitter post and Facebook post that was making the rounds in the board game realm this week about some blog post about a bunch of snippets of women's experience at game shops and board game nights and stuff like that. And I have no idea how much of it is accurate, true, or correct, but that's not the point. The point, it doesn't matter what my perspective on it is. If someone that is affected feels that way, that's all that matters, is how that person feels. And so I think the number one thing is creating an environment that's open and welcoming. I will mention this, and this is I hope this doesn't sound, again, like I'm on a high horse or anything, but there's a local, the local convention and quarterly game days in my town they're run by a group called the Eugene Games Gala. And the Eugene Games Gala is actually run by a woman named Lorna, who is awesome. She's so good at coordinating these events. She makes everybody feel welcome. She's a lot of fun to hang around. She is an awesome board gamer. And I've noticed that the population at our egg events here in town are probably upwards of sometimes 30 to 40% women. It's a really excellent, wonderful mix. And I don't know if it's because the events are coordinated by Lorna, so people feel like it's a safer environment because they're being coordinated by a woman. Or if it's just the awesome people in the Eugene community. We have a really great board gaming group. There's at least 30 to 60 core people that you'll recognize and see, at these events. And new people trickle in and out all the time, of course. But I think, and of course that has, I think that the amount of mutual respect and just the fact that we're there to be friends and play games is really what it's all about, and that's all it takes. I think that if more people went out of their way to be more welcoming, I think that it would have a huge, colossal impact. And that's not just the players. It also goes for designers as well. There's, it's about 2 years ago, I was at a trade show, and a new product for a board game was being unveiled. And it had male and female characters in it. But the difference between the two was that the male characters were clothed, and the female characters were wearing these skimpy little bikini things. And it's kind of like, oh. And I was talking to the publisher about it, and I was like, well, I was trying to find something positive to say. And after trying to find something positive to say about this new product that they were launching, he just mentioned, no, I can't stand the artwork that was chosen for this. But it was I had no say in it. So and he, even the person that was involved in the creation of the project was a little bit embarrassed by the content, the objectification of the female form in it, and it's just one of those things that I think with a little common sense and mutual respect, you'll see a big difference and impact. I'm hoping, and I have faith, that the board game community doesn't go down the same pitfalls that the video game community goes down, because that's a mess. So I think that's the first step, and it's a pretty simple one. Anyway, enough soapbox for now. Let me just get back to my normal narcissistic conversation here. So let's go on to the next question. Ryan asks, how do you feel about people creating free digital versions of board games from scans for use with Tabletop Simulator? That's a good question. Now, if it's done with the blessing of the owner of the content, the game publisher, whatever, then that's great. I think that there's another digital tabletop environment, Tabletopia, and even Board Game Arena, I believe that those two systems, at least, all the games created on there are made in conjunction with the publishers. The publishers even provide the source artwork. And what's neat and encouraging about that is because it shows that those publishers understand that the video version of board games aren't necessarily competition that are going to cannibalize your physical board game sales, but are complementary. And people that never would have found the game are going to discover them online in this way, and it's going to become a self-sustaining loop. It's going to feed on itself. And I think it's a good thing. So if there's a publisher that is wise enough to make those assets available to be built, that's great. If the publisher says no and doesn't want to, and someone says, well, I'm going to do it anyway, that's not that cool, I think. I can understand why someone does that because they want to. They want to play the game, they want to share it, but two wrongs don't really make a right in that case. But I hope that with Tabletopia, I think it's, I don't know if it's in its final beta or if it just launched on Steam, but it's got to be close. I'm hoping that Tabletopia helps open up this door and create a much more of a digital virtual board gaming environment and make that, I love to see it where when a board game is released, creating a digital Tabletopia or other online service variant of it to be co-released with the product. I'm hoping that just becomes the norm. That would be excellent to see. So, good question there. Okay, New Troll asks, Have you made any component upgrades that your daughter didn't appreciate? So far, no. But I mean, she's 9 now, and so I think she's still of the mind that anything that we do to upgrade a game or fiddle with components, she just thinks is, kind of a fun art project or craft to do. So I don't think that she has developed an opinion on any of the games themselves enough to the point where she thinks that a component change or upgrade would be a detriment to the soul of the game. So I hope that answers your question. Let's go on. Christopher H. mentions that Mark Rosewater of Magic the Gathering Research and Development says, quote, restrictions breed creativity. So it doesn't surprise me that it's yet another thing that Mark completely agrees with me on. So thank you, Mark. And thank you for Christopher for pointing out yet that other thing that Mark and I are in simpatico with. Yeah, so it doesn't surprise me. Oh no, the comments jumped. Okay, well, while I try to finagle back to where the comments were, let me go back to the last of my segments here, my presentation part. Okay, so there I was, beginning of 2014, starting with Board Game Breakfast. My YouTube channel must have had, I remember, I think it was February of 14, I think my YouTube channel had about 80 subscribers. So I've been doing it about 6 months, and I had about 80 people that were subscribed. So at that point then, starting with Board Game Breakfast and stuff, there were several events that resulted in spikes in subscriptions to the Pair of Dice Paradise YouTube channel. Board Game Breakfast obviously helped. The mockumentary for the Jack Vassal Memorial Fund auction, that definitely helped. But even before all of that, on February 24th, 2014, about 6 months into the channel, Talks from Crits Happen, just out of the blue, posted this video where he featured the, quote, top 3 sites that you may not know about. And he talked about 3 YouTube channels that were kind of new, and Pair of Dice Paradise was one of them that he listed. I was like, what? And now, prior to that, my only communication with Talks had been like a tweet or a Facebook direct message like 3 months earlier when I started my channel, where I basically said, hey, Talks, I just want to let you know you've been one of the people that inspired me to start my own channel. I enjoy your work. Thanks. To which he probably responded, thanks. It wasn't like that wasn't really this, it wasn't the establishment of a relationship. It was just, hey. But so then there's that video. But that video more than quadrupled the number of subscribers that I had at that point within 24 hours. So I went from 80 to nearly 500 or more subscribers that one day because of that video. So that's one of the things that I wanted to stress. When people ask, what has your secrets to board game content creation? Well, one is to have something to say, and to say it consistently. And always try to push your quality and your content. But another piece of the puzzle is to be in the right place at the right time. And there have been Board Game Breakfast, that video by Crits Happen, and a couple other little things I feel have been lucky breaks. And I've never done any project in my life, personal or professionally. I've never done any other project where I feel like I have been in the right place at the right time this frequently. And it's been a fortunate blessing. It's been lucky. And so, it does take luck. I'm a person who believes that you can manufacture your own good luck to a certain point, but establishing relationships and giving as well as taking, but also being in the right place at the right time is one of the things I think that it takes to be successful. I've had other videos, I've talked about other things about success, but I don't think I've ever talked about that one. So there's something new for the conversation. All right, I've got like about 10 more minutes here. And before I go back to the YouTube chat to do a last rapid fire of YouTube chat questions, I also posted on the Dice Towers Board Game Geek forum. I made a forum post there asking people to send me questions about board game content creation from there as well. I received about half a dozen of them. So real quick, I'm going to address the questions that I received from the Dice Towers Board Game Geek forum. And I really appreciate the people that took the time to post there. So Christian G asks, when making board game media, like this episode of the Metagame, why do you pick that time? That's a good question. And a lot of people asked about the time. In fact, people seemed to be unnaturally preoccupied with the time. And I'll let you know, there's no real big methodology to it. I usually, there's 3 times a day that I usually do, I can schedule these metagame episodes. First thing in the morning, right before I start work, during my lunch break during work, or at the end of the day, right at the end of work. You can kind of see a pattern there. So really, I do try to break them up from early, at least Pacific Coast time, early, midday, and end of day. But really, it's just to fit them in around my work schedule, because that's what it takes, and that's the time I have available. So that's why they are scheduled the times that they are. Then Christian also had a follow-up question of, have you thought about doing some normal text chats afterwards? I have. Text chats, though, are really all over the place. And you're commenting on something that happened this long ago and stuff without some sort of real good moderation software. They kind of turn into a mess. And the other reason I haven't is also just because, again, I'm fitting these in around my normal work schedule. So after they're done, I typically don't have a lot of time to continue with them. So that's fine. Nigel M. asks, after the recent thrift sift, how difficult is it doing scripted stuff with your 9-year-old daughter? Stuff like, does she contribute lines? Does she recite lines easily? That's a really interesting question. And I wish I could share more of the raw footage that we recorded for that one, because it would explain this better. But I've discovered doing these that my daughter is very, very patient. Because sometimes, all the time, multiple takes are necessary to do a scene. Because I've discovered I have to clearly communicate to her what I have in mind for the scene. So sometimes we'll start it and both of us will do it, and I'll think, oh, no, let's try this other approach. And so we'll do sometimes 4, 5, or 6 takes of a scene sometimes. Now, what also happens with that is that especially when you're working with your 9-year-old daughter, doing something over and over again tediously, you start to get less excited about it each take. So I have to find, when I'm working with her, I have to find that combination, okay, with myself as well. I have to find that combination of where I still have the energy, where we all have the energy level of we're excited to do this, versus, but we don't have it down yet, versus to, yes, we nailed our delivery on that take, but we're not very energetic about it anymore because we're sick of doing it. You have to find that equilibrium, that crossing of those crosshairs of that the most energy possible with the best possible take. And especially working with her, it's really important to find that. For example, in the Treasure Trolls Thrift Sift video, the scene where we get changed back to our normal selves after being turned into being from the 90s, and she says, "Hooray! I'm Generation Z again." That scene, she has the best energy in that scene. But I screw up my line. If you watch, which I know you all will after this episode's over, if you go back and watch that, after she goes, "Yay! I'm Generation Z again," my line, I screw up. I have this awkward pause in the middle of my sentence. And we actually did a couple more takes after that where I delivered my line normally. But her energy level in that take was so good. It was like, now I got to keep that take, even though I screwed up the line with this weird awkward pause in the middle. We got to keep that take with her with the excellent energy levels. So you got to find that combination. And so it's almost an interesting puzzle to put together sometimes when you're doing the editing and post-production. Nigel M. on the Dice Tower Board Game Geek forum asked a question that was similar to that. Is it harder to write for other people? And that's a good question. And the answer to that is yes and no. When I'm writing a script, it's actually really easy to write for other people because I know the information that I want to convey and I know the jokes that I want to tell. So the scripts actually usually kind of end up being written the same no matter who's appearing in the video. The real trick is getting the participants to understand what I have in mind for the delivery and the timing. To turn into that overbearing wannabe tyrant and direct them to act in the scene, for lack of a better word, the way we want to act. And also, since videos are filmed usually out of order, so you have to be able to describe what they're reacting to and why they're reacting that way in order to create a coherent, seamless presentation in it. So the writing part isn't as hard. The directing part is actually I've found a challenge with. One last thing on that is during the mockumentary with Mick, when we recorded that, when I was directing that, after the first like 20 minutes or so, I realized I was directing him, giving him instructions to make him act like me. And so I actually had to stop and go, whoa, I'm directing you to be a second Chaz. No. I want you to be you. So we did some of the scenes where he was more of himself. And it was really a weird thing. I noticed I was molding him on camera to act a certain way instead of letting him be his own presentation, if that makes sense. So that was really another thing that's difficult and interesting to work with. Jason W. Hi, Jason. Always good to see you online. Asks, was there a project that you wanted to do that you skipped because you thought it wouldn't be worth the time? Or a project that you did do, but you were surprised how much longer it took, other than the mockumentary? Most of the projects that fit those criteria of not worth the time or too much time, those usually don't get past the scripting phase. I have a stack of, like I have on a Google Drive, that's where I write all my scripts and stuff. And at any time I have like a dozen or more scripts that are in various stages of development. And there's a few that have been in a holding pattern for a while because I just think they need a few rewrites first. The Treasure Trolls, the Treasure Trolls Thrift Sift video that went up this week, I found that Treasure Trolls game probably last summer, almost a year ago now, but that one went through so many revisions. There was going to be it was actually originally going to be almost a horror movie type of genre where the trolls were chasing us around the house and we were hiding in rooms, and there was this weird plague and this rash that we would get. And it went through all of these different rewrites before it finally landed on what it was. And so it takes a while sometimes for them to click. And one of the very first videos that I recorded, probably one of the first 5 ones, way back in 2013 or so when I started, one of the very first videos that I recorded was a review of Nothing Personal. And I had it all done except for one little tiny shot that I needed to record. And that was more of a standard, straightforward, straight up review. And I got busy and didn't get back to recording that final shot. And, one thing left to another. And I never did get back to recording that final shot. And this day I look back at the raw footage. It's like, I'm kind of glad I never released this one. So there's been a small handful of videos that did get abandoned midway for one reason or another because they were either too much or weren't going the right direction. But there's been a few. So that does happen, Jason. Okay. We are at an hour now, but I mentioned I was going to go through the comments a little bit, so I'm going to try and do a rapid fire question with like the last 10 minutes or so. So this is your DVD bonus footage right here, an additional 10 minutes or so of Q&A. All right. Yeah, bonus 10 minutes of me going, okay. Has Tasty Minstrel Games given you a cease and desist order? This is about the hashtag. No, they haven't. They just the normal litigation, but no new cease and desist orders yet. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to point to the TMG thing the right way the first time. It's right here. Oh, yes. There we go. I got it backwards and everything. Okay. On dice, have you tried double 6 dice, D12s with 1 through 6 twice? Because rolling a D12 is better than rolling cubes. Vince, not only have I tried them, I have made a video about them that is on, it was one of the very first Dice Tower videos. So check the Chaz Marler playlist on the Dice Tower's YouTube channel for my double 6 dice review. Spoiler alert, I think they're awesome. Double spoiler alert, almost as awesome as I think the Rogue One trailer looked. So there we go. Chaz, what's your favorite player color, if you have a preference? My preferred player color is yellow, for no other reason than no one else ever wanted yellow. So I started taking yellow because it was just, okay, no one wants it, I'll play yellow. I got used to it. And as soon as I got used to it, I was introduced to the Eugene Games Gala people and the conventions here. And I don't know why, but everyone I've met since always wants yellow. So it will play and everyone grabs yellow first. So now I don't know what I play. The one thing I have started trying to do is I've tried to, whatever color I play on a given day, I try to stick with that same color in every game I play that day, because I found myself reaching for the color I played last game in the next game I play. So I don't know if that's happened to anyone, but yeah. Color memory. Huh? Yeah? Am I right? Yeah. Okay. Yes. So there you go. There's my almost interesting answer to that very cool question. What is the best action-adventure movie of all time? That would be my second favorite movie of all time, Die Hard. Best action-adventure movie ever. So there you go. Hint, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'll give you that consolation prize. That is also good, but it's no Die Hard. Okay. Let's find more questions for our rapid fireness that we're rapidly firing through. Let's make the comments jump so that we lose them all, because that's what people like to watch, is someone scrolling through comments. Alex asks, do you have a theme song for your top 100? If not, what kind of thing would you like it to be? Oh, that's a good question, Alex. I was just planning, unless I heard otherwise from someone at the Dice Tower, I was planning on just using the Chaz Marler Paradise theme that the amazingly talented and awesome Eric Herman wrote and composed for me. That was a Jack Vassal Memorial Fund thing that he auctioned off a couple of years ago, and I bid on that one and got it, and he made me a theme song. So I was just planning on doing that one because technically I already do have my own theme song. So I'd love to be able to use that one. What is all that about more women in board gaming? You never hear women babble about how more men is needed in knitting clubs. That's a good point, mostly because if a man, in my opinion, if a man wants to be in a knitting club, he'll just walk in and start knitting and not care what anyone says. And usually the other participants are respectful enough not to make him feel uncomfortable there. So I think I see what you're trying to say, but I don't think the door swings both ways in that certain case. Chaz Marler, Politico. There's my political dissertation for the day. Let's see. Okay. Someone's saying I said what they just said. Again, makes my job so much easier if I just pilfer and plagiarize. That's what I should do next time. I'll just plagiarize the YouTube chat. I guess it's almost what I do anyway. So, hey, makes my job even easier. Okay. Benjamin mentions, as a fluffy guy myself, unthinking would be funny for a guy to dress up the way women are portrayed in video games, cosplay. When I went to Gen Con, I actually did see a few people doing that very thing. So, yeah, it's a thing that you can do. Christopher H. asks, have you seen the board game makeover segment on Board Game Breakfast? Seems like you'd dig it. Yes, I have. I believe it's Mike. Yeah, I believe his name is Mike, and he was at Gamma. So I met him in person at Gamma, and we talked about his segments and the components and his incredible upgrades. I really do enjoy the board game makeover segment and the crazy things that he does. I think he goes way overboard, but that's the fun. And I really enjoy seeing what he comes up with, and I really appreciate his segment very much. And he's a nice guy in person. makes me wish I didn't walk up to him and start punching him, in the face. But I did, apologize eventually by mail that I didn't send it. But anyway, Mike's a nice guy. Would doing the metagame on a weekend somehow work for you, even just from time to time? Yeah, I've thought about that. The thing is that currently, every weekend, other things have been scheduled for me to do by my family. So I kind of have to live up to those obligations as well. But yeah, anything's possible. Someone mentioned that I need to be like a Kubrick and take like 70 takes until I get everything just perfect. That's how I earned the nickname in high school, right there. Yeah, been there, done that. Okay, a couple more questions. Theme song for my top 100. Double 6 dice. Millennium Blade. Oh, come on, where? Kubrick. Okay, here we are. There's 5 more. Kabuki Kid mentioned again that she ended up buying a bunch of those double 6 dice. Oh, awesome. They are cool. They were neat. There's the thumb. And someone also takes yellow because people tend not to like it. And it stands, yes, and you're right. Yellow also stands out on the board. To be honest, that's another reason why I like it. My preferences for colors are usually yellow, then like orange or white, then brown, or then purple, then anyway. So kind of usually the brighter colors, except not red, because my wife usually uses red. Or Little V Bug uses red too. Okay. Double 6 dice, yellow. Eric mentions, now that Millennium Blades is coming out, are you going to make a board game about the meta of board gaming? How do you know we're not playing it right now? Okay. I'm going to do the last 2 questions before I lose a turn. Jesse mentions he also chooses yellow. Let's hear it for the love for yellow. Woo! Yeah. All right. And finally, Kabuki Kid asks, who did the component proponent theme song? And this is what I'll wrap up with today. Because that was a friend of mine, Tom, not Vassal, a good friend of mine here locally named Tom, he can do everything. He can do computer design and illustration. He can do 3D. He does guitar work and stuff. He's just amazing in everything he does. And so I came up with the idea for the proponent theme song, and I was at his house one day, and I said, hey, Tom, can you play something on your guitar, real crunchy guitar thing, like a da-da-na-na, da-da-na-na-na, da-da-na-na-na-na. And he grabbed his guitar and his little 4HN mobile audio recorder. He put it down, turned it on. He goes, you mean something like this? And he goes, and after about 2 minutes, he had figured out the tune and then played it. Like that? It's like, that was perfect, Tom. So I took it, he saved it on a little SD card. I took it home. Then I did the lyrics to it. And the little woo in the background is my wife on the other side of the room, completely impromptu, ad-libbed that little woo when I was recording it. But it made the whole thing work. So her little woo was a total surprise that ended up being the best part of the whole thing that we weren't planning. And after he heard it on a couple of videos, Tom said, oh, well, if I had known you were going to make all those videos, I would have actually put some effort into it. So that whole guitar thing, apparently that's just him just barfing it out really, really quick, just vomiting out some good, masterful guitar work after learning the tune in 2 minutes. So it's just amazing. I think it's exactly what I wanted. I wanted a real crunchy, garage bandy sounding lo-fi theme song for the proponent. I thought it turned out perfect. So with that, I think that I'll let you guys go. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining me once again for this episode of The Metagame. If there were any questions about board game content creation, the history of Paradise, getting started with the Dice Tower, or other content creators that we all know and love that aren't covered in this video, let me know in the comments below, because I would be happy to continue the discussion because a lot of people have asked, and it's a great opportunity to have a video and a chat log that I can point people to in the future. But in the meantime, for more board game news, reviews, and even commentary, be sure to check out and subscribe to both Pair of Dice Paradise and The Dice Tower. And also be sure to follow us on Facebook and like us on Twitter, and even flip that around the right way if you're so inclined, because social media makes the world go round today. Starting now. Until next time, I've been Chaz Marler, your host who has just run out of things to say. So until next time, I have been playing with the comments section, the metagame. I think that's how that goes. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos.
Find
more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.